Hi friends, this is Alicia from Malinka Yarncraft. Welcome to my channel. In today's video we will be making the Primrose vest, which is basically a sleeveless cardigan. What I love about this vest is that it is so versatile. You can wear it over a sweater for a casual trip to the grocery store, or you can dress it up with a blouse and tall boots for the office or date night. And I also love all the little details, like the pockets and the button at the front. The tutorial is for size small, and you can find the written pattern for sizes extra small through 5XL in my Etsy and Ravelry shops. I hope you enjoy this tutorial, and if you do, please give it a like and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. In today's tutorial, I will be using the Lion Brand Heartland yarn. This is a medium weight yarn and it is 100% acrylic. There are a lot of different brands that have a very similar quality, similar weight yarn, so it should be easy to substitute if you cannot find the specific yarn in your area. I will be using the color White Sands today, and if you decide to use the same brand yarn and the same exact type of yarn, I'd recommend that you get enough in the same lot number. This specific yarn has quite a bit of color variations and different lot numbers, so make sure you get enough yarn in the same lot number, and I will put the amount that you're going to need in the description box below. We're going to need a 6mm hook, which is a US J10. We're going to need scissors, a yarn needle or tapestry needle so that we can sew our panels together, and we're going to need some stitch markers. So I do use 1 stitch marker per panel just to mark the right side of my work. I also use stitch markers to mark my rows. So when I count my rows, I mark every 10th row with a stitch marker, so this way if I have to go back and count my rows, I can easily count in tens every 10th row because they will already have a stitch marker on them. But if you have a different preferred method of counting your rows, you have a row counter, you don't need as many stitch markers. You will only need 3 stitch markers. Another thing that we can use that is optional is a button. And I want my vest to close at the front, so I will use a button. If you don't want it to close, if you want it to stay open, then you won't need this button. This one is 25mm wide, but you can use any size that you find aesthetically pleasing. This specific button is a wooden button, and I got it on Amazon as part of a kit. And it has a ton of different kinds of buttons, and it has these cute little wooden handmade labels as well. So I will put this down in the description box in case you want to check it out. All right, so let's get started. So we're going to start with our front panel and go ahead and make a slip knot. And then chain 39. Okay, so I have 39 chains here, and make sure you go back and count your chains again. We will need a multiple of 3 to make this pattern work, so make sure you have the right number of chains here. So for row 1, we're going to start working into the second chain from the hook, and we're going to work single crochets all the way across this row. And for this pattern, I'm going to work into the back bumps of my chains. So if you look at the front here, you can see the V, and if you turn your chain to the back, you'll see the back bumps right there. And this is just going to give this edge a pretty look here. So at the bottom of my panel, you're going to be able to see the V's from the chain right there, so the front loops. Okay. Right, so into the second chain and working into the back bumps right here, I'm going to work 1 single crochet. Okay, and then we're going to work 1 single crochet into every single chain all the way until the end of this row. And so at the end of this row, you're going to have 38 single crochets, or a multiple of 3 plus 2. Okay, so I finished my 38 single crochets. And this side where we just finished our row 1 is going to be the right side of our work. So we're going to grab a stitch marker and we're going to mark one of the stitches here on the front with a stitch marker so we know where the right side is. And we're going to be doing this on all of the panels because we're going to be sewing our panels on the wrong side, so we want to know where the right side is on every panel. Okay, so we're ready to start on row 2. To start row 2, we're going to chain 1 and turn. This chain will not count as a stitch. All right, so we're going to start by working 1/2 double crochet into the very first stitch right here. So we're going to yarn over and start our hook into this very first stitch. Yarn over, pull up a loop, and yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on your hook. So we made 1/2 double crochet here. Next, we're going to skip 1 stitch, and into the next stitch, we're going to work a cluster of 1 single crochet, chain 2, and 1 single crochet. Okay, so we're going to skip the next stitch and then insert our hook into the next one. We're going to work 1 single crochet. We're going to chain 2 and work 1 more single crochet into the same stitch right there. Then we're going to skip 2 stitches and then insert our hook into the next stitch and work the same cluster. So 1 single crochet, chain 2, and 1 single crochet. We're going to skip 2 stitches and go into the next stitch. Work 1 single crochet, chain 2, and 1 single crochet. And we're going to work this pattern until the end of the row, until we have 2 stitches left. Okay, so to recap, we chained 1 and turned our work. The chain didn't count as a stitch. Then we worked 1/2 double crochet into the very first stitch. In the beginning here, we only skipped 1 stitch, and then into the next one, we worked 1 single crochet, chain 2, 1 single crochet. Then from now on, we're going to skip 2 stitches and then work 1 single crochet, chain 2, and 1 single crochet. Skip 2 stitches, work 1 single crochet, chain 2, 1 single crochet. Okay, so I'm going to finish this row skipping two stitches, working 1 single crochet, chain 2, and 1 single crochet until the end of the row, and I'll meet you back here when we have 2 stitches left in this row. Okay, so at the end of the row here, when we have 2 stitches left, we're going to mirror the beginning of the row, and we're going to skip 1 stitch and work 1/2 double crochet into the very last stitch of this row. So yarn over, skip this 1 stitch and go into the last stitch in the row and work 1/2 double crochet. Here we go. And row 2 is finished. Moving on to row 3, and row 3 is going to be a row of double crochets, and I just quickly wanted to show you something before we start on this row. So it's going to be the row that has the clusters of double crochets over here, and I just wanted to show you the beginning of each row. So I have a sample here that I made for another tutorial. And typically when you work a row of double crochets, you start the row with a chain 3. So you end up with these little gaps here. So depending on the project, that might be okay. I mean, you still have straight edges. However, for my pattern here today, I want to have no gaps here on the edges of my panels because we want to be able to sew the panels together seamlessly, and we don't want to have these gaps. So I'm going to show you how to start a row of double crochets here without having this big gap that forms from starting a row with chain 3. Okay, so instead of working chain 3, we're going to turn our work away in such a way that our working yarn is behind the hook, so behind the work right there. Okay, so there are a couple ways of turning your work. So if you're used to turning it this way, just keep in mind that for this specific stitch we're going to need to turn it so that the yarn is behind our work. Okay, so now we're going to stretch out the stitch a little bit. Right there, you want to make sure it's not too tight, so stretch it out slightly. We're going to insert our hook into this very first stitch right here, and we're going to work a single crochet. Make sure that this loop here, your second loop for your single crochet, is not too tight. We're going to work into it. So go ahead and finish your single crochet. Now we're going to stack another single crochet on top of this one. So what we're going to do is we're going to insert our hook into this vertical bar here that was formed from that single crochet. Okay, so right there into this vertical bar on the side of your single crochet, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then yarn over and pull through 2. So now we made stacked single crochet. So we made 2 single crochets on top of each other, and that created a height of a double crochet. So this method makes your beginning of the row look a little bit better. So it is a denser stitch than if you had chained 3, and it does resemble a double crochet a little bit more. Okay, so now we're going to continue with our row, and in this row we're going to work 3 double crochets into every single chain 2 space. So if you pull your stitches apart here, so in the previous row we worked 1 single crochet, chain 2, and 1 single crochet. So we want to work into that chain 2 space right there, right here. So make sure you work into that space. Okay. All right, so you're going to yarn over, insert your hook into the chain 2 space, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So we made 1 double crochet, and we want to make 2 more double crochets into the same stitch. Here we go, 2 and 3. Okay, so we're going to repeat this pattern until the end of the row. So we're going to keep working 3 double crochets into every chain 2 space. So every time you have a chain 2 space right there, you're going to work 3 double crochets into all of these spaces. So let's do one more together. Find that chain 2 space and work 1, 2, and 3 double crochets. Okay, and we're going to repeat this until the end of the row. So go ahead and work 3 double crochets into every single chain 2 space, and then once you finish the last chain 2 space, you will have 2 more stitches left here in the end. So I'll meet you back here. Okay, so at the end of this row here, when we have 2 stitches left, we're going to skip 1 stitch and work 1 double crochet into the very last stitch. So yarn over, go into that very last stitch, which is a half double crochet from the row below, and work 1 double crochet. Okay, so next we're going to start on row 4. And row 4 is basically the same thing we did in row 2, where we're going to work the clusters of 1 single crochet, chain 2, and 1 single crochet, but we're going to work them into the top of the 3 double crochet clusters. Okay, so we're going to start the row the same way, so chain 1 and turn, and this chain will not count as a stitch. Then we're going to work 1/2 double crochet into this very first stitch here. So yarn over, go into that very first stitch and work 1/2 double crochet. Here we go. Now we're going to start working these clusters, and we're going to work them into every cluster of the 3 double crochets, and we're going to be working right into the middle of them right there. So every time you have 3 double crochets there, you're going to work into the second one of the 3, so right in the middle. Okay, so we're going to skip this 1 double crochet. We're going to go into the second one and work 1 single crochet, chain 2, and 1 single crochet. Then we're going to skip the next 2 double crochets and work again into the second of the 3. Right, we had the cluster of 3 double crochets, and we're going to work right in the middle there. So we're going to place 1 single crochet, chain 2, and another single crochet into that same stitch. And we're going to work this pattern until the end of the row. So we're going to skip 2 double crochets and then into the next one, work 1 single crochet, chain 2, and 1 single crochet. So go ahead and work this pattern until the end of the row, and I'll meet you back here once you work into that very last cluster of the 3 double crochets. Okay, at the end of row 4 here, when we have 2 stitches left, we're going to skip the next stitch and work a 1/2 double crochet into the last stitch. And if you turn your work here, you will see the 2 V's. So we did work those 2 stacked single crochets in the beginning of the previous row. And so the first stitch you can see on the side here is from that first single crochet. And then the next one is the one that was on top. So this is the top of our stitch. So this is the top of the last stitch, which we need to work into. So we're going to skip this one, and then into that last one, we're going to work 1/2 double crochet. And row 4 is finished. From now on, we're going to repeat rows 3 and 4. So we're going to repeat these 2 rows, row 3 and 4, for a total of 15 rows. And the first row of single crochets counts as well. So we're going to repeat until we have a total of 15 rows. So in the 15th row is going to be a row of 3 double crochets. Okay, so we're going to repeat those rows 3 and 4. Then we're going to have a repeat of row 3 here at the end. So this is going to be a total of 15 rows, including that first row of single crochet. And then we're going to work an opening here where we're going to have a pocket. And the pocket is going to be sewn onto the back. And so we're just creating this opening here, and then later on we're going to create a square, and we're going to attach it to the back of the panel, and we're going to have a nice pocket right here. All right, so let's finish those rows, and once you're done with row 15, I'll meet you back here. So I finished the 15 rows, and now for row 16, we're going to start working on that pocket opening. So we're going to start this next row the same way we did the row of those clusters with single crochet, chain 2, single crochet. So it's going to start the same way. So chain 1 and turn, and then work 1/2 double crochet into that first stitch. Go. Then we're going to work 1 single crochet, chain 2, 1 single crochet into that second double crochet. Okay, then we're going to skip 2 double crochets and work the same cluster into the next one. So into the middle of the 3. So one more time. Okay, so single crochet, chain 2, single crochet. So now after we've worked the 2 clusters, we're going to chain. So we're going to chain 24 here for our size. Okay, so once you have 24 chains, we're going to come down here and we're going to count our double crochets, and we're going to skip 26 double crochets. So we're going to count from here. So this is the last one we worked into. So from here on, we're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 10, 13, 16, 19, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. And so then we're going to bring our chain down to the 27th double crochet, and make sure that your chain doesn't twist. Okay, and then we're going to work into this double crochet here, 27th one. We're going to work 1 single crochet, chain 2, and 1 single crochet. Then if you look at this row here, we do want the both sides mirrored. So we have 2 full clusters on the side, so we skip everything in between, and then we want to have 2 full clusters on this side as well. So then we're going to finish off this row. So we're going to go into that next cluster of 3 double crochets into the middle double crochet, and work our single crochet, chain 2, and single crochet. And then we're going to finish off this row by working 1 half double crochet into the very last stitch here. There we go. And our row 16 is finished. So our next row, row 17, is going to be worked the same as the previous rows of double crochets, but instead we're going to be working into the chain. So we're going to start it the same way. So turn away from you so that the yarn is behind your hook, behind your work, and work those 2 stacked single crochets that will replace a chain 3. Okay. Then we're going to work our cluster of 3 double crochets into the next chain 2 space. We're going to do the same thing into the next chain 2 space. Okay, so now we have to continue our pattern, but we have to work our pattern into the chains. So what we're going to do next is we're going to skip this 1 single crochet, this last single crochet left here before the chain. Then we're going to skip the first chain, and we're going to work into the next chain. Okay, so we're skipping 1 single crochet, and we're skipping 1 chain, and we're going to work 3 double crochets into the next chain. And I'm going to work them into the top 2 loops right there. Okay, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, next we're going to skip 2 chains and then work 3 double crochets into the next one. Okay, so for the next cluster, we're going to skip 2 chains and work into the next one. Again, I'm going to work into the top 2 loops right there. Okay, so we're going to continue this pattern. We're going to skip 2 chains and then work 3 double crochets, skip 2 chains, work 3 double crochets, skip 2, work 3 double crochets, and so on until the end of the chain. And here you should have 1 chain left. So I'm going to work up this chain here, and once I have 1 chain left, I'll meet you back here. Okay, so here we are, and now we have 1 chain left. So we're going to skip this last chain, then we're going to skip that next single crochet, and we're going to work our clusters of 3 double crochets into our chain 2 spaces here. So we have 2 of them left, so we have 2 clusters left, and we're going to finish off the row just like we did in previous rows there. So work out 3 double crochets in every chain 2 space, and then finish off the row with 1 double crochet into that last stitch. Okay, so now once you set them against each other here, you should have the exact same number of clusters. Okay, so they should line up. And it might feel a little bit loose right now, but once we work more rows on top of it, it will be fine. And from here on, we're going to continue with our pattern. So the same pattern we worked before we started on the pocket opening. So we're going to repeat our rows 3 and 4 until we reach the desired length for our panel. So next row is going to be a repeat of row 4. So the single crochet, chain 2, single crochet. Okay, so we're going to keep repeating until we have the length that we need for our panels. So I finished the front panel and I ended up with a total of 65 rows, and that gave me a length of 29 inches. If you need to adjust the length, you can keep going or you can do fewer rows. I just want my vest to reach below my hips. So this is kind of the length that I came up with for myself for this size. So for 29 inches, I needed a total of 65 rows. And as always, just a reminder, the 65 rows does include that first row of a single crochets here. All right, so once you finish your front panel, you can go ahead and fasten off and cut the yarn. And before you do that, you will have to measure out a decent length for the tail that you're going to leave after you cut the yarn. We're going to use that tail to assemble the panels together. So we're going to attach the front panel to the back panel later, and we want to leave a very long tail so we can slip stitch with this piece of yarn. If you don't want to do that, you can always attach another piece of yarn. If you want to leave a short tail, that's an option as well. So I figured for this width of the panel with a slip stitch, I'll need approximately 60 inches tail. So I'm going to go ahead and measure out 60 inches. And for the metric system, so 60 inches is going to be about 155 centimeters or so, 154 or so. So you're going to measure out, and this is for the size that I'm making in this tutorial. So if you're making a larger size, just check the pattern, or you can add an additional 6 inches for every inch of the front panel. So this one is 9 inches wide, and I need 60 inches of tail here. And if your panel is wider for your size, then you're going to need to add more. So I'm going to measure out 60 inches right there. So basically my entire tape measure here, right there. And now I'm going to go ahead and cut, and I'm going to pull it through now to fasten off. All right, here we go. And our first panel is complete. So you will need to make another one of these. So we need 2 front panels. So you're going to go back in this video and you're going to complete another panel exactly the same way. So once you complete the second panel, we can start working on our back panel. As you can see here, this is how I keep track of my rows with stitch markers. So I've marked every 10th row, and this is how I kept track of my rows here. All right, so go ahead and complete the second panel, front panel, and then we're going to work on our back panel. Okay, so our back panel is going to be worked the exact same way as our front panels, with the exception that we're not going to create that pocket opening, obviously, so we're just going to keep going. For the size that I'm making in this tutorial, we're going to chain a total of 84. So we're going to chain 84 for the back panel. Then we're going to work a row of single crochets into the back bumps. And you can go back and rewatch how we did the front panel and use the count that I'm giving you right now for the back panel. So for this size, again, we're going to chain 84 and we're going to work one single crochet into back bumps of every chain, and that will give us a total of 83 stitches after you complete row 1. Then starting with row 2, we're going to work on our pattern. So you're basically going to keep repeating the same pattern we did in our front panel, and you're going to go for a total of 65 rows. So the same number of rows. If you made adjustments to your front panel, you're going to do the same amount of rows you did on your front panel. So for me, that is 65 rows, and that includes this row 1 of single crochets. And again, you can see that I've been marking every 10th row with a stitch marker. And so once you complete all 65 rows, you can go ahead and fasten off. And you don't need to leave a long tail here because we left long tails on our front panels. And so I'm only going to leave a shorter tail, enough to weave in. All right, so go ahead and complete your back panel. So again, you will chain 84, and then you're going to start working in the second chain from the hook into the back bumps of chains, and you're going to have a total of 83 stitches, and you're going to work the exact same amount of rows that you worked on your front panels, and the pattern is the same as your front panel. So you can go back and check the video again on the front panels, but at this point you probably already have the stitch down. So go ahead and complete all 65 of your rows, and then I'll meet you back here for our next step. In our next step, we're going to be making the backing for the pocket. So we're going to create a square that will cover this area here, and will go up to above the opening that we created on the front panel. And we're going to attach that square to the back of the panel, and that is going to be our pocket. Okay, so for the pocket, we're going to start working the same way we have for the other panels. And so for the pocket, we're going to chain a total of 27 chains. So go ahead and chain 27. Once you have 27 chains, we're going to do the same thing we did with our panels, and start working in the second chain from the hook and work a row of single crochets. For the pocket here, I just wanted to mention that I don't need to work in the back bumps. You can work in the top loop here. This will be sewn onto the back side, so onto the wrong side of your panel, and so we just want some good loops here that we are able to work into when we go back and use a tapestry needle to sew the bottom of this pocket to the panel. All right, so go ahead and work 26 single crochets across. And all right, so once you have your 26 single crochets, you're going to move on, and you're going to work the exact same pattern we have in the front and back panels. So hopefully you have the stitch down by now. If not, you can go back and rewatch the beginning to see how we did the front panels here. And so this is your row of single crochets, and we're going to then work our pattern up until we reach the same height of our pocket opening right here. Okay, so this is a total of 16 rows. So if you count here, so you have your row of single crochet, that's 1. Then the row that has 1 single crochet, chain 2, 1 single crochet, that's 2. Then the row of double crochets, that's 3. So then 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Then over here we have our row, another row here that we started, that's row 16. So you're going to go ahead and work a total of 16 rows. So the last row is going to be single crochet, chain 2, single crochet. So once you've worked these 16 rows, I'll meet you back here and I'll show you how we're going to finish off the pocket. Once we're finished with our 16 rows for the pocket, we're going to work one more row on top of this one here, and we just want to even out these ridges here so that we can sew the pocket on straight. So what we're going to do is we're going to work a row of single crochets. So we're going to turn our work and work 1 single crochet into the first stitch. And then we're going to go into the chain 2 space and we're going to work 3 single crochets in this chain space. So basically we're doing the same thing we did previously on our row of double crochets, but instead of double crochets we're working single crochets in the exact same way. So we start with 1 single crochet in the first stitch, then we're going to work 3 single crochets in every chain 2 space. So 3 single crochets in the first chain 2 space. Moving on to the next, so skipping everything in between, go straight into the next chain 2 space and work 3 single crochets, and so on until the end of the row, and then we're going to finish the row with 1 single crochet. Okay, so here's the last chain 2 space. So I'm going to work my 3 single crochets, and then into the very last stitch, into that half double crochet from previous row, we're going to work a single crochet to finish off the row. Okay, and our pocket is finished. So now we want to fasten off. Before you fasten off, you will want to measure a pretty long tail. So we're going to use it to sew the pocket onto the panel. And I would say you would need approximately 80 inches, so go ahead and measure out, and it's going to be pretty long. So if you're not comfortable sewing with a super long tail, you're welcome to make it shorter, and then you can always connect a piece of yarn later on and continue sewing on the pocket. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to measure off a really long tail of approximately 80 inches, and then I'm going to cut and fasten off. The next step is going to be sewing this pocket onto our front panel. But before we do that, make sure you make a second one of these. So we will need 2 for both of our panels. Okay, so here I have one panel already finished. So I sewed on the pocket here, and you can barely see it, but it's on the back side here, and it blends in with the pattern. And if you look on the front side here, we just have a pocket opening right there. So we're going to do the same thing on this other one. So I will show you how I did this. So the first thing you want to do is turn your panel with the wrong side up. So this was my right side. So I'm going to turn it over to the wrong side. Here we go. And then we're going to do the same thing with a pocket. So basically we want our pattern to line up. So our pocket is also going to be facing with the wrong side up, right there. So now we have to sew this pocket onto our panel. And we want to sew the pocket right above, right here. So right above the opening. So you have to attach it right over here. Okay, and then we're going to go down and attach this left side here. Then we're going to attach it to the bottom row and then go up on the right side, and then all 4 sides will be complete. Okay, so let's start working on that. So go ahead and grab your tapestry needle. Before we start sewing our pocket on, we want to make sure that we know where it's supposed to go. So where the sides should line up on your main panel. So we have the same number of stitches here in the middle of the pocket as we do on the inside of the pocket opening right here, plus another column of stitches. So we have one more stitch on each side, right? So the stitch should line up right outside of your pocket opening. So you want to mark the second double crochet of the 3DC clusters that are right outside of the pocket opening. So these ones right here. This is where the sides of our pocket are going to go, right there. So if you want to trace the entire line here, you can mark the double crochet everywhere if you want to. Otherwise, you'll just have to keep track of it as you sew. Okay, so this is where it's going to go on these sides here. The other thing you're going to want to make sure that lines up is, so the top row of your pocket is going to go right here. So we're going to attach it to the bottom of this opening here. Okay, so on the top side of the opening, on the bottom row. Okay, and then the bottom of the pocket is going to line up with the first row. So we're going to attach it to the first row here. Okay. Okay, so once you know where your pocket should go, if you want to, you can pin the pocket to the panel so that it doesn't move and you know exactly where it's supposed to go. Then you also want to make sure that the rows of stitches line up as well. So your double crochet rows should line up with the double crochet rows, and the single crochet rows will line up with the single crochet rows. All right, so once you got all of that figured out, we can start sewing the pocket. Okay, so I'm going to start in this corner here, and as I said, since I want it lined up with the bottom of this top of the opening, and I want it lined up with that second double crochet, so I'm going to start in here. So when you insert your tapestry needle, your yarn needle into the stitches, make sure you do so on the loops that are on your side here. So you don't want to go all the way through so that your yarn is actually visible on the front side. So you're just going to go through one of the loops. It really doesn't matter which loop you go through, if it's one loop or two loops, as long as you don't go all the way through. Okay, here we go. And so we're just going to go through the pocket and then through the loops on the bottom here. So make sure that your stitches also line up, that your pattern lines up. So we had 3 single crochets here, right? So our middle single crochet should line up with the bottom of that 3DC cluster right there. See, this is a little loop on the bottom of those 3 double crochets, and this is the middle of the 3 single crochets. So I want to line up the pattern here, and we're just going to whip stitch all across. Okay, so I'm going to go through this next stitch and through another loop here. There we go. And you want to pull this sort of tightly, but not too tight to where it kind of bunches up. Okay, so go into the next stitch, into the next loop here. There we go. Next stitch. Next stitch is the middle of the 3 single crochets. So it needs to go into the bottom of the 3 double crochets. Right there. Okay, go into the next stitch, to the next loop. Here we go. Here we go. And so if you go into every single stitch and every single loop here at the bottom of that row, then they should line up perfectly. All right, so go ahead and finish this side, and then I can show you how I keep track of the sides here as well. Okay, so I reached the end of the top row here, and now I have to go down this way, and I have a stitch marker here that I put here earlier just to show me the line that I need to follow when I sew the side of the pocket to my main panel. So the middle double crochets here, you could either pin them right away, or you can just follow this line. So make sure that your pattern lines up. So you want to make sure that your double crochet rows here line up with the double crochet row there, and the single crochet rows line up with a single crochet row. So we can pin it right away with some stitch markers, or just make sure that we follow this line, check in periodically, make sure your pattern lines up. So I can pin the more bottom one here, and then I'm just going to follow my line all the way down. So I'm going to turn this to make it a little bit more comfortable. There we go. So I'm going to go down this line now, and here the stitches are not going to be as clear because it's the side here. So as I said earlier, it doesn't really matter what loop you go into, just make sure that you don't go all the way through the front panel, right? So just pick some loops here on the outside and try to follow this line here, so the middle double crochet. Otherwise, it's really up to you how you do it. I'm just going to show you a couple rows. Okay, so I hope this makes sense. So go ahead and finish this side at your own pace, and I'll meet you in this corner here. Okay, so I'm finished with this side, and I'm going to turn again just to make it more comfortable, and we're going to work the bottom of the pocket and the panel. So on this side here, we're going to work into the chain, the starting chain of the pocket. But when you work into the front panel, you don't want to work into the beginning chain, because we did have a really nice, we worked into those back bumps so that we have a nice edge here. So we don't want to ruin this edge. So instead of working into the chain, we're actually going to work into the row of single crochets. So right here. So I'm going to use these loops on the back of those single crochets from that first row, and I'm going to attach them this way. Okay, so right there. And again, the same thing we did on the other two sides, we want to make sure that our pattern lines up. So if it helps to pin, again, go ahead and do that. So we want to make sure that these columns line up, right? So this is the first cluster of double crochets, second, third, fourth, fifth, right there. So if it helps to pin them together, you can do that just to make sure that they line up. You should have the same number of chains here and the same number of single crochets here. So if you just follow 1 to 1, that should work out really well as well. So go ahead and finish this side, and then once you turn and do your last side here, this one is done exactly the same way as we did this one. So you're just going to make sure that you follow that line of double crochets, and I marked it here with my stitch markers. So I want to follow the straight line. Okay, make sure that your rows line up again, and once you reach this corner, you can go ahead and fasten off, and you can weave in your end right away, or you can do it after you're done with the entire pattern. Okay, so for the assembly, we're going to take our back panel and we're going to lay it down with the wrong side facing down. And so the right side is going to facing us. Then we're going to lay our front panels on top, and our front panels are going to be facing with the wrong side up. So the two right sides are going to be facing each other. Okay, so I did mark my panels in the beginning when I started working on them with the stitch marker for my right side, but you can also see it based on the pattern itself. Okay, so the front sides are facing each other, so we're going to place our front panels on top of the back panel, and you will have a little bit of a gap here because of the difference in width. Okay, so once you line up your panels, we're going to start the assembly. And we're going to start by seaming the shoulders together. So we're going to use slip stitch up here and join the shoulders together. Once we join our shoulders, we're going to have to figure out how much room we need for our underarm area. So how much room to leave here. Okay, and then after that, we're going to seam the sides together. All right, so let's get started on the shoulder seams. Before we proceed, I just want to mention that, again, as always, you have to make sure that your pattern lines up here as you join the two panels together. So, I mean, it is the same stitch, so it should be pretty straightforward. So your stitches should line up as you join, okay? If you want to, you can make sure to pin the last one. So let's see. So we want to make sure that our clusters line up right there. Okay. So this is our last one. So then we have an extra, and this is where we're going to end joining our panels. Okay. So the method that I prefer to use here is slip stitch and the outside loops. This creates a really nice pattern on the inside once you flip it over to the right side. If you want to, you can just whip stitch it. You can do whichever method you prefer for joining your panels, but I will show you how I do it. So to start out, I'm just going to slip stitch these first two stitches together. Just make sure you go into the right one right there. And I did leave this super long tail when I finished my front panels. So I'm going to use this tail. I'm going to slip stitch these two together. Okay, so from now on, I'm going to be using the outside loops. So on the panel that's in front of you, on the top, you're going to use the front loop only, right there. And then on the panel that's in the back, you're going to use the back loop. Okay, and then just slip stitch all the way through. Again, the panel that's on top, we're going to use the front loop. The panel that's on the bottom, we're going to use the back loop. Right there, and we're going to slip stitch. And I'm going to do this all the way until the end, right there. Make sure this is not too tight. All right, so go ahead and finish slip stitching these two sides together. Okay, here I am at the end, and my stitches lined up perfectly, as you can see, so I have 2 more to go. So I can remove this stitch marker, and into the last one I'm going to work through both loops on each side. So both loops on both sides. And slip stitch. And as you can see, I had the perfect amount of yarn, thankfully. So now I can go ahead and fasten off. And then we're going to do the exact same on the other side. And you can see here how our shoulder seam turned out. So if you do it with this method, you kind of have this cute seam here. It kind of looks pretty, but again, if you don't want to, you can just do regular slip stitching, or you can whip stitch your panels. Okay, so for the other side, we're going to do the same thing. And so the long tail now is on this side, so I'm going to have to figure out where I need to start. So I'm going to line these up. Here we go. Okay, so then I have to start right here. Okay, so make sure all of your stitches line up, and this is where we're going to start. Okay, so I'm going to go into that first stitch and into this one and pull through. Here we go. And then from here on, we're going to do the front and the back loops only. And then the very last stitch here, so the exact same thing we did on the other side. The last one, the last slip stitch, is going to be through both loops on both sides. All right, so go ahead and finish this off, and then I'll meet you back here. Our next step is going to be joining the panels on the side here, so the front and the back panels. And the same thing we did previously with the pockets, we want to make sure that our stitch pattern lines up. So the front panel and the back panel, we want to go row by row and make sure that our rows line up. We're going to start at the bottom here, and I'm going to use the whip stitch here as well, so you can use your preferred method. And we're going to go up until we reach the armhole opening. And since this is a vest, it doesn't really matter how wide this is. So we don't have any sleeves to attach later, so we don't have to match any gauges or anything. So this really depends on your comfort level. So if you're making this for yourself, you can adjust the opening here to your preference. So I marked it here with a stitch marker. So I marked 10 inches from the top. So I'm going to whip stitch all the way up to my stitch marker here and leave this arm opening. Okay, so you can do, maybe you can stop a little bit earlier as you whip stitch and then try it on and see if you like that opening width. If not, you can keep going. All right, so in order for me to make sure that my rows line up, I'm going to count the rows and I'm going to pin them together with stitch markers. So every 5th to 10th row or so. So I'm going to count 5 rows from here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is a row of double crochets here. Row 5. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm going to pin it. There we go. Then I'm going to do one more, and then I can keep doing this as I go up and keep moving my stitch markers up every 5 rows. You can do it every 10, whichever way you prefer. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a row of single crochets. There we go. Two, 3, 4, 5. Right there. So now I can get started, and then I can slowly move these up every 5 rows. So I'm going to attach a new piece of yarn right here because this tail is pretty short. So I'm going to attach a new piece of yarn in the bottom corner here. And again, I'm using a really long one. You don't have to use one that is this long. All right, and now I'm just going to whip stitch all the way up. And again, it doesn't matter what loop you go into as long as your rows line up. So whatever works here, make sure you really pull on that yarn. There we go, but not too much to where it bunches up, okay? So you want it taut but not bunched up. All right, so I'm just gonna keep going up, and I'm going to complete this off camera, and then I can meet you back here. Once you complete the one side, you can go ahead and complete the other side the exact same way. Okay, so I finished seaming my panels together on both sides, and as I mentioned previously, I did stop at 10 inches from the top. So the depth of my arm opening here is 10 inches, which is approximately 26 centimeters. Based on my gauge, that amounts to 22 rows from the top. So 10 inches is 22 rows. So then I tied off right below the 22 rows. So I have complete 22 rows on both sides that are open here. Okay, and then I tied it off on the row that would have been the 23rd row. Okay. So once we finish seaming our panels together on both sides, our next step is going to be working and edging around this arm opening. And we want to work on the right side of our panels. So we were seaming on the wrong side, right, on the inside. So we're going to flip this over to the right side before we start working on our next step. Okay. Go. So we're going to join new yarn right here at the bottom of this arm opening, right into the seam. Okay, so we're not connecting into rows. We're going to join a new piece of yarn right into the seam here at the bottom of our arm opening. Okay, and we're going to slip stitch here. I'm going to tie this here at the bottom, going to double knot it so it doesn't come loose. Okay, so now we're going to work a row of single crochets all the way around. To do so, we're going to watch out so that we spread them out evenly. So what we're going to do is we're going to work one single crochet into every row of single crochets. So the row where we had one single crochet chain to one single crochet, we're going to work one single crochet into the side of that row. Once we are in the side of the row that had 3 double crochets there, we're going to work 2 single crochets into that row. So 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2. Okay, so we're going to work single crochets so here's my row of single crochets, and I'm going to work a single crochet into it. There we go. And if it helps, you can go ahead and mark this as your first stitch of the round so you don't lose it later. Okay, so next I have a row of double crochets, so I have to work 2 single crochets into this row. There you go. So you just go into any 2 loops on the side here and work your single crochets. Okay, then here I'm going to work 1 single crochet right there. And then 2 single crochets into the next row. Okay, so we're going to continue the same way until we reach our shoulder seam. Then you want to work 1 single crochet into the seam. Okay, so when you look closely here, so you have a row of double crochets, you're going to have 2 single crochets right here. Then you're going to work 1 single crochet into the seam, and then you're going to continue, and then you have another row of double crochets here, so you have to work 2 single crochets, and then you're going to continue the same way as we did on this side. Once you reach that shoulder seam, make sure to count your stitches here. So we had 1 single crochet per row of single crochets, and then 2 single crochets per row of doubles. So I had 22 rows, so I have to have 33 stitches up until now before I reach my shoulder seam here. So make sure you double count and you have the correct stitch count here. Once you verify that you have 33 single crochets here, we're going to work 1 single crochet into this shoulder seam. I'm going to go all the way through. There we go. Okay, now we're just going to continue the same way we did on the other side. So we're going to work 2 single crochets into every row of double crochets, and 1 single crochet into every row of single crochets. And this side is actually easier to work into, so this should go faster. So after the shoulder seam, going down, you should also have 33 stitches. So your total stitch count after you're done here should be 67. So we had 33 on one side, 33 on the other side, and 1 in the shoulder seam. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and finish off this side, and then I'll meet you down here once we are back to our stitch marker. Okay, so I've come all the way around and finished this round, and again you should have 33 stitches after the shoulder seam. So you have 33 stitches on this side, then you have the 34 stitch into the seam and 34 more, so a total of 67 all the way around. Okay, so I'm going to turn so I can keep going. So to finish off this round here, I'm going to remove the stitch marker, and we're going to slip stitch into our first stitch right here to close this round. Now we need to work 1 more round. So for the second round, we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to work 1/2 double crochet into the same stitch. So yarn over, go into that same stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and yarn over, pull through all 3 loops on your hook. And this is the first stitch of this round, so I'm going to mark it again just to make sure that when I close my round at the end, I know exactly where I need to slip stitch. Okay, so this round is going to be pretty much the same as our row of single crochet, chain 2 single crochet that we did on our panels. So we're going to skip 1 stitch and then work 1 single crochet, chain 2, 1 single crochet into the next stitch. So we're only skipping 1 here. We're going to work 1 single crochet, chain 2, and 1 single crochet. Okay, then we're going to skip 2 stitches and work 1 single crochet, chain 2, and 1 single crochet into the next stitch. And we're going to continue this pattern all the way around. So we're going to skip 2 stitches, and then single crochet, chain 2, single crochet. So we're going to work this around until we have 4 stitches left here. Okay, so I have 4 stitches left, so I can skip 2 again and work single crochet, chain 2, single crochet. And then here at the end we're going to skip 1 and we're going to slip stitch into the top of that first half double crochet. Okay, so skip 1 and then slip stitch into the top of this half double crochet right there. And now we can fasten off and cut our yarn. Here we go. And the edging on one of our arm openings is finished. So this just gives it kind of a nice consistent look. So you have a nice edging here that is consistent with the rest of the pattern. So once you finish one side, go ahead and do the same thing on the other side, on the other arm opening. Our next step is going to be working the edging around the neck and the front opening here. So we're going to start on our front panel at the very bottom. So with the garment facing you, this is going to be the front left panel, which is the right front panel when worn. And we're going to start at the very bottom, right? So the way it's facing us, it is on the left-hand side, but this is the right panel when worn. And we're going to join our yarn down here. So I'm going to go ahead and join my yarn. I'm going to turn this because I'm going to be working up this way, so it's a little bit more comfortable this way. So we want to join our yarn in this corner here, and I don't want to start in this first row here because I'm going to end up with a little step here, the difference between the first row and that foundation chain. So I'm going to use a trick here because as you can see, the chain, the foundation chain in the beginning is pretty tight, so I can't stick this big hook into it. So I'm going to use a trick here, and I'm going to use my tapestry needle and thread it so that I can join my yarn this way. So I'm gonna go from the back to front, and then back through the same stitch again. Okay, and you want to keep this loop here. We're going to need this loop, and then go ahead and pull your needle out. So here we go. Since I wasn't able to stick my hook in this tight space, so you just thread it up and down, and then you have your little loop here. Okay, so now I can slip stitch, and I'm going to double knot this here again, just the way I did on my arm openings, so to make sure it doesn't come undone later. Okay, so now we're going to work the same way we worked on our arm opening as well. So here we have our first row was a row of single crochet, so we want to work our first single crochet into this row right there, and we can go ahead and mark our first single crochet with a stitch marker just so we know where our last stitch is going to be when we come back. So now we're going to work the same way as the arm opening, so we're going to work one single crochet into this row here. There we go. And then 2 single crochets into that row of double crochets. So exactly the same way, and we're going to work the same way up the side of this front panel all the way up until we reach the shoulder seam. So once you're here, I will meet you back here. Okay, so I finished working single crochets along the side of the right panel when worn, and I reached the shoulder seam right here. In total on this side you should have 97 stitches, 97 single crochets if you are making the exact same size. So now we have to work one single crochet into the shoulder seam, So right here where the seam is, we're going to go into that seam and work 1 single crochet. And now we have to work 1 single crochet in the opening of this back panel here. Okay, so we have 7 stitches right here. And if you look closely here, this one, the first stitch and the last stitch here are taken up by that seam. So technically we've worked into this one already because we used the seam to work a single crochet into it. So we're going to skip this partial stitch here since it's already taken up by that seam. And we're going to go into this next stitch. So we're going to work 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And we've reached this other partial stitch here, the one that's taken up by the other shoulder seam. And we're going to work into the shoulder seam directly. So we're going to skip this partial stitch here and work into the shoulder seam right there. Okay, so in total in the back side here we have 9 stitches, so 2 in the seams and 7 in between. Now we're going to continue working our single crochets down the other panel, so the left panel when worn, and we're going to work them the exact same way that we worked on this side. So we are starting out with a row of double crochets here, so we're going to work 2 single crochets into this row. So 1 and 2. And then 1 single crochet into this next row. Here we go. And we're just going to continue the same way, and again after the shoulder seam, so if we start counting from this first row on this panel, you should have 97 stitches as well on this side. In total, once you finish this row, you should have 203 stitches if you're making the same size as me. So let's continue working our single crochets all the way down, and I'll meet you back here when we reach the corner. Alright, so I finished working down this panel, and make sure to go back and count your stitches again. And in total in this row you should have 203 stitches if you're following along with the same measurements, same size as in this tutorial. If you made any adjustments, you will just need a multiple of 3 plus 2 stitches in this row. So we're going to continue and we're going to work 1 more row. So we're going to chain 1 and turn. Okay, so we're going to work the same pattern that we have previously, and we're going to start with 1/2 double crochet into that very first stitch. Okay, then we're going to skip 1 stitch and work 1 single crochet, chain 2, and 1 single crochet into the next stitch. From now on, we're going to skip 2 and then work 1 single crochet, chain 2, 1 single crochet, skip 2, 1 single, chain 2, 1 single. Okay, so we're going to work this pattern all the way around continuously until we reach that first corner on the right side. Okay, so I'll meet you back here once we have just a few stitches left so that we can finish off this row together. Now, if you wanted to add a button, first what you want to do is you want to try on your vest and see where you want your button to be. So basically we're going to create a bigger chain on the side of the edging here, so that we can fit the button into it, right? So we'll fit that chain around the button. So I placed a marker here around row 36. So this is row 36 for me from the bottom, and this is on the right panel, so right front panel when worn. So I placed a stitch marker here because this is where I thought I would prefer my button to be. If you don't want the button, you'll just continue working until the end of this row in the same way and finish off your edging. But if you do want to add a button, then we're going to make a slight modification in this row here. Okay, so go ahead and mark the area where you want your button to be. And my button is going to be below the bust area. So mine is on row 36. Once I know where my button is going to go, I'm going to continue with my pattern. So I still have to reach that stitch marker. So I am approaching my stitch marker here, and it may not be the exact way. So if your stitch marker is one stitch up, just make sure you still do it in the right place. So you still have to skip 2 stitches here. So in this spot where my stitch marker was, instead of chaining 2, so you're going to single crochet, and then instead of working 2 chains, we're going to work 4 or 5 chain stitches. So that depends on the size of your button. Okay, so I have this button here, and so I want to chain enough so that my button can go through that chain. So instead of chaining 2, I'm going to start, let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then single crochet into the same stitch. So now what you want to do before you move on, you're going to see if your button fits through here. My button fits through, and I feel like it's a little light too. So I'm going to go back, and I'm actually going to do 4 chains instead of 5. See, 1, 2, 3, 4, single crochet. Let's see, and perfect. Okay. Once we've created this space here for the button, we're going to continue with our pattern. So skip 2, and then just work your edging with single crochet, chain 2, single crochet until the very end of the row, and then I will meet you back here once we reach the end of our row here at the bottom of our panel. Okay, and at the end of the row here, once we have 2 stitches left, we're going to skip 1 and work 1/2 double crochet in our very last stitch. Okay, and now we can cut the yarn and fasten off. And I played the yarn chicken, so I don't have to cut it. I can just fasten it off. And our edging is finished. So if you didn't do the button and you just did the edging here, you can go ahead and start weaving in your ends, and that will be your last step. If you did decide to do the button, so we're going to go ahead and sew on our button now. Okay, so we're obviously going to add a button on the opposite side, on the opposite panel from where we created that larger chain for the buttonhole. So I marked the row on the other side as well, and so this is where my button is going to go, right there. So if I look closely here, I can tell that my stitches over here are a little bit tighter. So this is where my button is going to go, right here. So I'm going to be using this polyester thread that is made for sewing machines. It's just very strong, and I also doubled it up. And I chose a color that matches my button. Okay, so I'm gonna start by first wrapping up my thread around the back side here where my button is supposed to go. So the button is gonna go right here. So in here, I'm just going to try to wrap it around this yarn and secure the thread first before I start sewing in the button. Make sure I knot it. Here we go. Right, so now I can bring it over to the front and start sewing on my button. There we go. I'm just gonna go through it a few times. Make sure it's nice and tight. Oops. Okay, once you went through enough times, let me just do it one more time. Okay. Now I just need to secure this tail here as well. Here we go. Go, and then just hide it in the back there and cut. Okay, so now the only thing left to do is to weave in my ends and my entire project will be complete. Here we go. And now I'm going to finish off the rest. And once I finish this step, my garment will be finished.